Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel, putting the podcast on and getting involved again. It's been a while. I'm very, very sorry. It's been like 3 weeks, if not maybe even longer, since my last video. I don't think I've done one since the Newcastle game. So I'm massively, massively sorry for being essentially missing in action for like 3.5 weeks. But yeah, been good reason, been on holiday, been busy with work, had a lot going on. But I'm back now. We got a big run through until the end of the season now, and I've got some exciting things that I want to talk about. Probably my next video that I'm going to introduce over the next few months to really kind of continue building this channel, continue building this community, and continue delivering kind of, as much content as possible. I felt like I was in a really, really good flow of getting content out before my little hiatus here. But I guess sometimes it kind of needs to be done. And when life calls, you got to answer. So, thank you so much for sticking with me, getting the channel back on, and choosing really to react to and come and watch a reaction to what has been a pretty disappointing game, a pretty disappointing result in the FA Cup on Saturday night. Brighton obviously crashing out. It's a bit extreme, that, isn't it? Going out of the FA Cup to Nottingham Forest in the quarterfinals, sadly missing out on a trip to Wembley and getting another semi-final. It would have been, a third semi-final in 6 years? If we'd made it, it would have been very, very impressive, considering all the other things that the club have done in terms of finishing in Europe and sustaining themselves as a Premier League club and all the infrastructure we've built and the players we've attracted. But actually getting to Wembley would have been a massive, massive achievement as well, in terms of consistency that we'd done it. But with that said, we didn't get there. And ultimately, probably on the night, I don't know what you think, but I think really you can say that perhaps we didn't deserve to. I don't think Nottingham Forest were particularly kind of far and away kind of the better side. But I think on the night, if you were kind of measuring it out, they probably edged it, didn't they? Like, they probably deserved it a little bit more, particularly in 90 minutes. I think Brighton held their own. It was a very even game. Both teams looked good. You could tell they were two good sides playing against each other. I think in terms of just like chances and kind of opportunities at goal, I think probably in possession, probably Forest. It felt like, just from watching it, I don't know the stats, it felt like they probably did edge it. Although with that said, I think in extra time, particularly that second half of extra time, Brighton really put on the pressure. And there was a moment in that probably last 5 minutes of extra time that I thought we were going to go and win it. Van Hecker whipping balls into the box. Obviously, we had that offside goal through Pervis Stupinian being offside for that João Pedro goal. So look, Brighton played well, but Forest, when it gets to penalties, it's very difficult. And Brighton were unfortunate with their penalties. It was a repeat of what's happened in the past with Brighton penalties. I've not seen too many penalty shootouts as a Brighton fan over the years, but all of the ones I'm pretty sure I've seen in the last there's only been like 2 in like the last few years, haven't there? This one and the one at Wembley, unless I'm wrong. And all the, it's tough. It's a lottery. And when you got a keeper like Matt Sells in goal, and maybe someone like Verbruggen, who's obviously a fantastic goalkeeper, but I don't think I've ever seen him save a penalty in a Brighton shirt. You kind of know it really felt like it. When I was watching, I just kind of thought, oh god, I can just Hinshelwood walking up, I thought, oh god, and even Verbruggen, when he went the right way for one of the pens, he still wasn't really making a save, and it kind of felt like it was, as soon as it went to pens, I didn't feel good. But I think there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot actually to be pretty pleased with, and you got to remember, actually, this comes off what was an unbeaten run after the last time we played Forest, obviously playing them on like the 1st or 2nd of February. We're now at the end of March, start of April. And, Brighton haven't lost the game since then, including going away to the Etihad, taking some big scalps in that time in terms of good performances and good wins and unexpected wins as well. I think, the way that Brighton have bounced back, you think of those the two games against Chelsea, straight after the Forest game, the FA Cup game, the league game, there have been many, many good performances. And actually what this period has done is it's really, really put us right in the mix for European football. Okay, maybe not Champions League. Look, that's still on. But actually it's put us right in the mix for European competition. And I think at the start of the season, if you'd said to a Brighton fan, I know this is such a cliche, at the start of the season you said this, but if at the start of the season you'd been offered, a quarter-final FA Cup, a decent FA Cup run, maybe you get a trip to Wembley, maybe you don't, And you also kind of go into the last 5, 6, 7, 8 games of the season with, you're in like 7th place and you're right in the mix for kind of a 5th place finish or a 6th place, 7th place, 8th place finish. Like, you would have taken that. And given all the conversation I was having at the start of February after the 7-0 defeat and my personal kind of, not reservations, but kind of my lack of conviction towards Fabian Hurzeler, if he'd spoken to, actually considering all of that feeling that I've had personally and the transition in this side and the number of new players that we've brought in and the fact that we've had to really kind of change things a lot this season in terms of losing a manager, losing some good players, having to kind of rebuild that midfield after losing Caicedo, McAllister, Gilmore in recent seasons. Actually, it's a very, very impressive feat. And I think on the night, it could have gone either way. I think what we saw was a team that obviously they weren't going to get beaten 7-0 again. Obviously, like, that is literally a one-off. I think I'll probably see, let's touch some wood, but I'll probably see another 2 results like that in my lifetime. It's so rare that you see a result like that, as any fan, really. So obviously kind of the quality of our players that we have was going to shine through in those next 7 games or however long it's been since then. And I think going through to the end of the season, we can be confident that we've got a team that are going to, really challenge those European positions. And when we come up against Forest again, they're not going to do us 7-0 again. Why would they do us 7-0 again? It was such a freak one-off incident due to kind of strange tactics. Once you get the momentum of goals against you, it's difficult to go against. But yeah, let's get into the game. So in terms of the lineup, really, it was much of the same. I think there was 1 or 2 changes. Obviously, we had Jack Hinshelwood at right back, Van Hecker and Webster at centre half, Estupiñán over at left back, Baleba and Ayari. Ayari came into midfield. He was the partner alongside Baleba. We had Mitoma left wing, Minteh right wing, as we're getting used to. Then we had Danny Welbeck up front with Jorginho Rutter. Now, to be honest, interchangeable really between Danny Welbeck and João Pedro. Obviously, Danny Welbeck having been out injured for a little bit this season. João Pedro looking in good form in recent games. I was surprised that maybe João Pedro didn't start this game, although he'd been away with Brazil. There's amazing photos of him wearing the Brazil number 9. It's mad to think really that, the Brazil number 9 is a Brighton player. And I think I'll come to the game, but if we just quickly take 2 seconds for this, you think of all the thousands of players in Brazil, the thousands, hundreds of thousands of young boys in the streets of Brazil. You see it in the movies, don't you? Like the passion they have for football. And the Brazil number 9 is a bloke who's playing for Brighton. It's unbelievable. Bloke living in Brighton. It's just like, what on earth? It's crazy. So yeah, he's had an amazing, couple of weeks, obviously going away with the Brazil squad. So that was obviously why he didn't start this game. But yeah, much of the same. And to be honest, it's a team that in recent weeks has done very, very well for us. Minteh and Mitoma on either side have really been our outlets. Baleba in the midfield, interchanging with a kind of Diego Gomez or Jack Hinshelwood. Obviously still without Veltman at right back, so we had to have Jack Hinshelwood play at right back. But it was a side that I liked the look of the side. And to be honest, it was a side that played well. I think, for a lot of the game we played well. We did create some chances. I think we had a lot of the game plan was maybe to soak up some possession. But everyone worked really hard, and I think that's one thing that we need to kind of mention is that I do think every player in that team worked very, very hard, particularly players like Minteh. I thought Baleba was very hard working. I thought Van Hecker was decent. There were lots of very good performances. I thought Verbruggen, despite kind of not coming up short in the penalty shootout, but not really doing much in the penalty shootout, I thought he had a good game over 90 minutes, 120 minutes. So there was a lot to be positive of. Obviously, Danny Welbeck, all of these other players played well. I think the thing that was difficult, and I think ultimately the reason why it was maybe a bit of a drab game, is obviously Nottingham Forest are a kind of a team all season. If you look at the stats, if you watch their games, if you listen to the rhetoric around Nottingham Forest, it's so clear to see that they're a team who basically, they don't soak up pressure and hit you on the counter-attack every time, but they're more than comfortable being a very resolute, compact side, sitting back, soaking up pressure, perhaps sitting deep at times, but relying on that pace in their wingers. Elanga, players like that, get Hudson-Odoi, getting them up the pitch. Chris Wood just being able to but you know what I mean? Be on the end of these chances made by the pace in their attack. Gibbs White, Elanga, driving them up the pitch. So actually, I think what Fabian Hurzeler probably tried to do in this game was not fall for the trap that maybe happened in the 7-0, which is, he didn't want to commit our players forward too much, become a really high pressing side, because that kind of feeds into the Nottingham Forest style a little bit. If we have all of the possession, we're high up in their half, and then they win the ball back and they can counter against us. That's the perfect Nottingham Forest recipe for attack. Actually, I think what Fabian Hurzeler tried to do a little bit was do what we've seen a bit more of in the last kind of 4, 5, 6 months with this side, is actually Brighton can be quite comfortable to not have loads of possession all the time. I know traditionally we're a possession-based club in the last 5, 10 years, but actually in the Fabian Hurzeler era, we're a side who are more than comfortable to not have loads of the ball, not to soak up pressure, but to maybe just go through spells where we're not seeing the ball and we're relying on, a bit like Forest actually, your Rutters and your Mintehs and Mitomas nicking the ball off someone and driving us up the pitch, and then we rebuild kind of in their half once we've won the ball back. We're not a side who are massively kind of hell-bent on dominating possession. I think we saw that against Nottingham Forest, where maybe we were a little bit more cautious and a little bit more aware of the fact that we shouldn't really take it onto Forest because they'll attack against us, and that plays into their hands. And ultimately, I think, to be honest, what that probably did was make it quite a dull game where both sides kind of were quite resolute. Both sides were kind of battling hard in the midfield. There wasn't much energy, kind of bodies in behind. There weren't, Nottingham Forest didn't even start their two wingers. Our two wingers, I thought, while Minteh showed loads of energy, I thought Mitoma had a relatively kind of flatter game than he would usually have. I don't think Minteh was massively effective. In terms of those wingers and that pace and the rutters getting in behind, and for them as well, for Forest, I don't think it was a game where loads of space was opening up. Teams were kind of compact and making it difficult, and it was a little bit harder for everyone to kind of, for the game to open up. And I think that's why, I've heard the punditry since, and actually there's a lot of talk around it being quite a boring game. And I do see that. And it was a boring game, 0-0 after 120 minutes. Of course, it's a bit of a boring game. But to be honest, I know in this one sense, it's kind of not really worked for us in the sense that we got a 0-0 draw and then we lost on penalties. But I actually don't mind playing that way. I think maybe this is just me personally, but I think if I was a football manager, I'd be quite similar in terms of a style to that kind of thing. Like, different horses for different courses. Be pragmatic and work out that all of the time you don't have to have all of the ball. And I quite like the fact that we can be a side who, we have individual brilliance in players. We have electric wingers. We have attacking midfielders in someone like Jorginho Rutter, who can get us up the field so easily, who can dribble past players. But we've also got a very strong midfield that we can rely on to kind of come up against the biggest teams. And I think that's really why, actually, against teams like Chelsea and stuff, we were able to do that, because what we did in those games, when we've come up against the bigger teams, is really rely on Mitoma and Minteh and those attacking players by soaking up, for want of a better phrase, this pressure and kind of being happy to relinquish some of the ball. So it was another example of that, but I think that's ultimately why it kind of made it a bit of a boring game. And it was a game where we couldn't really penetrate them too much because they're such a resolute side with some really, really good defenders and midfielders. But yeah, I thought in terms of kind of players I want to single out, I thought Minteh deserves a mention. I thought, not necessarily for the way he performed or the chances or he did or didn't create, but I think the work rate he showed was excellent. From minute 1 to minute, till the end of the game, he was brilliant. He gets up and down that right wing so much. He's not afraid to go in with a tackle, with a challenge. Obviously, we saw it with the Mitoma kind of penalty that was overruled. Like, our wingers are getting back and they're getting stuck in. And I think Minteh does that a lot. And obviously, no, it was Mitoma who gave the penalty away, the penalty that wasn't away. But Minteh does that a lot. You see him sliding into the box to win the ball back a lot. And I love that from him. He's a player who's so electric and so dynamic and quick and will run at players. But he's also a player who's not afraid to really, really get stuck in. There were plenty of other players. I thought Baleba was very good. I thought Stupinian was very good. I thought we saw the best of him. I'm surprised he didn't take a penalty, to be honest. I thought Gomez, when he came on, looked pretty tidy. That pretty much every player on the pitch played well. You can't say that anyone played badly, or to be honest, that anyone didn't give their all, because I think that was one thing that we saw, was that there was a real level of work rate among the Brighton players. Every player gave 100%. You could tell every player wanted to get to Wembley and wants to do something special for this club. And I think really, what we got to think now is that we're in a very good position in the league. Villa on Wednesday night is going to be a very difficult game. I think going into that, that. It's not a season definer, but I think that might really shift the needle in terms of where are we? Where is this kind of last? What is it? 10 games of the season? I genuinely don't know. 8-10 games of the season. Where are we going? Are we going to be in that kind of 8th, 9th position, or maybe we'll be able to kick on into that kind of 6th, 7th, 5th kind of region and properly get that kind of European football challenge for Champions League? I think if we could get a result against Villa on Wednesday night, it would be absolutely massive. But the trouble is, we've now had a game where we played 120 minutes on Saturday night. We've got Georginio Rutter having gone off with injury. That doesn't look good. You see him at the end of the game getting into an ambulance, obviously not being rushed away, but kind of clearly being taken to a hospital for a scan after the game, in crutches. For what it's worth, I think he's probably going to be all right. And famous last words, touch wood. But I do think he'll probably be all right. We're probably not going to see him against Aston Villa, though. It'd be very unlikely that we'll see him then. But it's going to be an interesting end to the season. Let's just talk about the penalties quickly, because obviously, who was up to them? So obviously, João Pedro was up to it, scored his one, put it top left, I think he put it. Brian Gruder, fair play to him. I think he deserves a shout out. He put away his penalty bottom right. And it's more of that kind of Phil Foden-esque that I do love about him, that left-footed, that technical quality, that ability to sit down the keeper and put him the other way. You saw Matt Sells kind of gave him a little wink after the penalty to say kind of fair play, because it was a lovely penalty. And actually, for the fact that Jack Hinshelwood, Diego Gomez, young players miss their penalties, actually in another young player, in Brian Gruder at 20 years old, in a foreign league to him, probably not speaking much of the language, only kind of 9 months into bedding into this team and this country. I think fair play to him. He whether he was put up to it or not, he went up and he took a penalty second in a massive moment and he scored it. And I think that really deserves kind of praise and just to kind of pat on the back for that. In terms of the penalties that we missed, it's, the Hinshelwood penalty was poor, and to be honest, the Gomez penalty was very poor as well. I do quite like the idea of just blasting it straight down the middle. I think often that's not a bad idea in terms of a penalty, but it was. I think when you're up against a keeper like Sells, who isn't just picking one way and diving, he is actually responding to what you're doing. You got to do a bit more. You got to do something a bit more creative than just kind of blasting it down the middle. And look, for these players, it's very simple. Like, they're not going to have people on their back. I don't think Brighton's that kind of club. I don't think the fan base is quite like that. I also don't think that there were massive, massive stakes on this game, in the sense that tell me if you felt differently, but this didn't feel like a be-all and end-all kind of game. Like, we've got to get to Wembley. Yes, it was a massive opportunity to potentially win silverware, and a team who are outside the traditional Big Six may well win the FA Cup this season. However, for some part of me, it didn't feel like a massive kind of moment where oh my God, we've got to win this because this is our moment to win a trophy. I actually felt quite, this is a nice added extra to a season which has been a bit complicated and a bit different and a bit transition-y, and actually we're in a very good position in the league, and this would be nice. So really, I don't think we're going to see Brighton fans kind of going down the throat of Jack Hinshelwood. It was a poor penalty, but he'll learn from it. He's a young lad, 19 years old, having 2 seasons that he could only probably have dreamt of in terms of the way he's played for Brighton and the impact he's had on this team and the role he's had on this team and the reliability we've kind of, we've needed him to have for this team. He'll bounce back from this. You can tell he's the kind of player who's got that character. He'll bounce back. And Diego Gomez as well. But I think, we saw him getting consoled at the end. It will hurt for him, but I think in some ways, maybe for young players, this is the best thing that could happen to them. I know it sounds a bit weird because it's obviously not the best thing that could happen to them right now, but it could be a real character builder for us and for them. And what it does is it makes those kind of sweeter moments even sweeter. And it's not like Diego Gomez is a player who's necessarily struggling at the moment. That's a real confidence knocker. He's playing really well. The cameos we've seen, the starts we've seen, the substitution appearances we've seen, he's looked really, really good, really positive. So actually, I think there's a lot to, he can just look at that as a kind of bump in the road. And what it does, it makes the good times even better, really, doesn't it? And it makes the moments where he's going to score the winner and, in the Premier League later this season or next, it makes that moment a bit sweeter. So Yes, they were poor penalties. I like the fact that Fabian Hurzeler said that he put players forward for it. I think it takes a mix. I think you do have to have those players who want to take it. I almost do think, was it a bit silly that we didn't put someone like Pervez Estupiñán forward who has taken penalties for Ecuador in the past? I don't know whether he is the penalty taker for Ecuador, but he's definitely taken penalties for Ecuador. And we saw it, last weekend or a couple of weekends ago against Man City. We've seen it in the past. He's got a real sweet strike of the ball. You think it's that goal against Tottenham he scored. He's got a real thunderbolt of a shot, and it was weird to see him not take it. But I guess maybe they might have thought, he's played a long game here after having been away and travelled. Can we rely on him? Who knows? But I do like that Fabian Hurzeler kind of put players forward too. I think that's a nice little thing to do. I guess it takes the pressure off the players, and he can then at the end of the game just take full responsibility for it, which is fantastic management, isn't it? To kind of let the players take the responsibility when you win, and then really put the responsibility on yourself when you lose. And I think overall, to be honest, there's a lot to be positive about. It wasn't the best game. It was a bit of a dull game, but I think Brighton played well. They played a style which actually ultimately worked. I know they weren't able to kind of score loads of goals in this game or pretty open, but they looked a good side in this game, and it was an unlucky one. We go into Wednesday. It is a massive game that I just really hope that Jorginho Rota is available for that, because he's such an important player, and in terms of getting us up the field and transitioning us from kind of midfield into attack and kind of our third into our attacking third, I think he's a really important player for that, as is Danny Welbeck and João Pedro, and obviously minteh and mitoma. So let's hope that it's not too serious an injury. And yeah, it's going to be a big game. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have I been talking absolute nonsense? Do you think it's a shocking performance? Do you think I've been too positive, negative? Where do you think this leaves us for the rest of the season? Were you that bothered like me, or was this quite a big deal for you? Let me know in the comments below who was your man of the match and how are you feeling about Wednesday, Aston Villa at the Amex. It's going to be a very, very tight and interesting game. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It really means more to me than you know. Leave a comment below, get involved, and drop a like on the video. I will see you midweek for some more conversation. And as always, up the Albion.